Welcome back. For years, political philosophers and economists have asked, how much tax is too much? In today's video, I decided to explore this question with an experiment in SimCity 4 to create the perfect society. The question? What is the greatest tax burden people would be willing to bear in order to contribute to the common good? I decided to begin by entering the region with all my other cities, some of which had succeeded, while others had failed. This time to create a new attempt at utopia. Max Tax City. January 1st, year 0. A city was born. Well, it wasn't a city yet, just a bunch of dirt and water, but where to begin? 100,000 Simoleons, 0 population. Demand was high, and that was a start. But there was one problem. Taxes were too low. Only 9%. It just wasn't enough. So after I paved a road and built the obligatory coal power plant to secure our main energy source, I raised the taxes from 9 to 20% in the spirit of the challenge for every sector of town. There might not be any sectors in the town yet, but there wasn't a town, and that was the plan. Where to begin? Agricultural demand was high, and so was residential. So I zoned farms around the periphery, planning to build wide and then establish residences in the middle of town. Only problem was that once I zoned everything, demand it died. It immediately died once everyone heard about the tax hikes. So this was the first problem I would encounter as mayor. Literally, no one will pay their taxes. I even waited a whole year, and not a single soul moved into the town. Oddly enough, my advisors thought everything was totally fine, and they're even slightly happy. I found this stupid and offensive. Usually my advisors were mad at me when I had a town, but there were no hospitals, or we were massacring the environment. Idiots. When I tried attracting more citizens into the town by building municipal services, then my advisors started getting testy with me again for no reason. The fire chief was upset. He was always upset, but that's beside the point. This time he was upset that we weren't covering the whole town's fire radius. But there wasn't a town. It was just the fire station. Well, there were a few other buildings. There was an elementary school, a police station, a museum, even a whole college campus. All just for literally no one. I piped water in for no one. In the end, by year 5, we had lost all of our money, no one lived here, and all my advisors were unhappy about the baffling financial situation of the town that never was. So I got offered a toxic waste dump to build across the river. But even that couldn't save me because people they hate taxes so much they don't want public goods at all, and they'd probably prefer living in a nuclear fallout zone or like a DMZ if it meant they didn't have to pay taxes. I had utterly failed, but I still felt good about myself. I mean, I had, after all, followed the spirit of the challenge to a T. The taxes were maximized, but it was time to try again and maybe alter the parameters at first. Sure, maybe we couldn't start out the city with maximum tax, but what if there was some other way? A way to start out slow with false expectations and then slowly rug pull my entire population by gradually taxing the hell out of them. And so I hatched my next set of plans. Seemingly overnight, the whole city was reborn from the ground up. Max Tax City, attempt number 2. Okay, so if 20% tax didn't work, then what about 19% tax? A first attempt, it didn't look like it would work. Negative 6,000 demand, across the board. But I tried it anyway, legalizing gambling, except that I wasn't allowed to legalize gambling until I had built a single road, presumably for people to gamble on. $100 of income per month. Progress. Gambling and a road. This town was already profitable. But how could I induce demand somehow? A profitable city where no one lives maybe isn't all that exciting. What about 18% tax? No. 17? No. 16. Nothing really was working. So I kept trying smaller and smaller numbers, but still nothing worked. And just no one wanted to live here. Yet. The default tax percentage is 9, so I moved my way down. 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, and 10. Counting by whole numbers, at last at number 9, demand returned, and fast. 6,000 demand. But like I said, 9% is the default tax, so this isn't really much of a max tax city, this is just a normal tax city now. Could we start it out at a higher number? What would they think of 9.1%? Outrageous success. And so I conducted a binary search algorithm. Could we go all the way up to 9.5%? If 9 was an acceptable tax percentage and 10 was unacceptable, how high could we go between the two numbers while still keeping demand? Could we go to 9.5? No, definitely not. That caused an abysmal negative 4,000 demand, but we're getting somewhere. So finally, after trying 9.2 and 9.4%, I arrived at the Goldilocks tax number, 9.3%. The highest possible tax number where people would still agree to live here without complaining and pay the taxes. There was only one problem. With only one road, there was still considered to be no road access because the first road wasn't touching another piece of road. And so I did it. I built another road, and then finally, at long last, civilization could flourish. The first Sim home. 5 people lived in our town. What followed was incredible. After lowering all taxes to 9.3%, I zoned the lands for dirty industry along the periphery of the city so that the pollution would just exit the map off the sides. Demand was high, and seemingly overnight, smokestacks appeared on the skyline and the way for civilization was paved. Max Tax City. We had 8,385 jobs, but no one living there. You know, at this point in time, I gotta say, I look back at the city and having people in your city is overrated. If you build just a giant sweatshop and fill the whole land with factories, that's fine. There was development and a ton of pollution, but there was no one there to complain about it. Only one of my advisors was upset about the lack of power plants. An easy fix. The fire chief kept freaking out since the factories naturally kept setting on fire. But for the first time, I was actually able to placate him by putting fire departments all around the town. Now this was insanely profitable. Now that the factories had built up the town, I gradually began to raise the taxes. And factories aren't needy like people. They just keep going. No one wants dirty industry in their town, so if you allow them at all, they'll pretty much just pay anything you want. And gradually, even to my own surprise, I was able to hike tax rates to 10, 11, 12, then 15, and even 20%, and they just stayed there. If you start the factories off at 20%, they won't really want to move in, but if you rug pull them, like I said before, then they'll be okay with that. So then I just let everything go. I gradually kept replacing the power plants with more power plants to prevent them from blowing up. At that, I checked the pollution. Not good. And then I left my computer running in the simulation for 260 years. No one ever lived there, and I raised $40 million. Technically, I had accomplished my goal more or less, an immensely profitable city where everyone paid the maximum taxes, and we were able to fund the fire department so copiously that flames never broke out. I completed some errands away from my computer for a few hours and just left it there, and when I returned, money in hand, I decided to blow up the city. I mean, it looked like a city, but no one lived there, so I felt like it was against the spirit of the challenge, and I couldn't live with that. Block after block of merciless, pointless bulldozing. It all revealed that there was an immense pileup of crap all over the land. And then I flattened the earth. I zoned more land for high-tech industry and power plants, but dirty industry moved in there anyway, so I raised taxes on them again, and then individually blew up each of their businesses again. Then I built parks in each of the patches of land to prevent them from ever coming back. Gradually, we cleaned up all the garbage by burning it and sending it into the atmosphere, clearing space for houses where crap had once occupied the land. Now was the time. Now I could use my $40 million from sweatshop factory money to make life better for just this small group of people. We built homes and services. Thousands poured in as we could use the money to finance schools, hospitals, libraries, museums, flourishing with common prosperity. I could bump up taxes in a society of communist love. I built multiple replicas of the Empire State Building in the middle of residential neighborhoods to show that we were doing pretty well. I had a lot of money. Sure, maybe no one had jobs, but they did have a replica of the Taj Mahal. Maybe I went a little far, though. Things started to feel a bit mismatched. At this point in time, I walked away from my computer and I forgot to save my game, so I had to do it all over again. Schools, services, running water. I funded every sector of our economy liberally to make sure that everyone had all the resources they needed to succeed. Gradually, since there weren't enough jobs for poor and stupid people, the poor and stupid people just died out. And rich people moved into town who were smarter and got better paying jobs. That's right, I killed off edged out the poor. Then I momentarily dipped taxes on high-tech industry to bait them in so that we could create more high-paying jobs. All toward the goal of trapping a population of rich people in our town so I could tax the hell out of them. My plan was working. As taxes fell, high-tech industry moved in, further supporting our impossibly expensive public services and bringing more and more of the rich into the city center. The town grew and grew. Everyone got smarter and smarter, getting higher and higher paying jobs, and I kept raising taxes on the people I didn't want in town. The poor, the dirty. I used the money to build the Empire State Building again. And then finally, it was time to raise taxes at last, upon the rich. Now that I had trapped them and created their own personal utopia. They wouldn't leave, would they? Our society was perfect. Raise taxes to the max on the rich. And then something I didn't expect. The rich people didn't just live with it like the poor and dirty industry people had to pay all their taxes. They just started leaving town one by one. They abandoned all the buildings until Max Tax City was but a shadow of its past. All the buildings lay in abandonment and ruin. And I guess that the moral of the story is that, well, rich people don't pay taxes, making this challenge almost entirely impossible unless you surrender yourself to creating a nation of sweatshops. And I think that's where all the money's at in government. Anyway, that's what I think would happen if you created a max tax city in SimCity 4. I'm Ambiguous Amphibian, and big thanks to my patrons and channel members who work day and night in a sweatshop to help me creating these videos. Until next time, my friends.